done Brexit properly. I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Howell, KC, who is a member of the ERG's legal advisory group and has been advising and helping to look at the detail of the Brexit negotiations for many, many years. Martin, a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Ties Talk. So we've just gone through the 7th anniversary, and the very same day, one Gina Miller, who's got her own political party, she's now basically come out and said that she thinks it's time to accept that Brexit has not worked out as was promised and that we should start to rejoin the process of rejoining. And she wants the opposition parties to declare that they are for rejoining. I mean, we've barely left and we haven't done it properly.
Well, you're quite right. We have barely left. In fact, there are some important advantages we've gained by leaving. We could not have done the vaccine development and rollout, which we did, if we hadn't been on the way out of the door. And there are important changes to financial regulation and other areas which are being made, which we couldn't do. And we've dodged a lot of bullets that would have hit us if we'd still stayed in the way of being on the hook for massively increased budget contributions, particularly for the EU's coronavirus so-called recovery plan. Huge budget contributions and loan liabilities. But what you're right about is we haven't made nearly as much, taken as much advantage of the freedoms that we've obtained than we could and should have done.
Absolutely right. I mean, I'm just aghast and furious that we haven't cut taxes that we could do on VAT, on energy bills, that again, this freedom allows us to do. The government hasn't done that. We haven't deregulated. I'm concerned the Prime Minister, Martin, has actually basically, with a bit of a nod and a wink to Ursula von der Leyen as part of the Windsor framework, has said, don't worry, we're not going to diverge. We're not going to deregulate. We'll stay pretty much sort of tied up to your EU regulations and all will be fine.
Well, I think there is a worry. I don't want to start talking about the Windsor framework because I could talk for 3 hours about the complexities of that. But the basic problem with it is that Northern Ireland stays inside European Union, a single market for goods. All EU laws apply directly there. And of course, this then causes problems. We changed the law in Great Britain, and then that causes problems for Northern Ireland businesses in both buying stuff from us and exporting, sending goods inside the United Kingdom from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. So it creates a big pressure on the government not to diverge from this morass of EU regulation that we're still stuck in.
Which, in a sense, the proof is in the pudding.
I find it rabbit in the tar pit.
I find it extraordinary that those on the Remain side of the argument who now think that we should rejoin seem to be, and they sort of blame our economic challenges and the state of the country, they seem to completely ignore the fact that Germany's in recession, which is, of course, within the EU, the whole of the Eurozone is in recession. I mean, we're flatlining. We're not technically in recession. We might be heading towards it, but actually, we're slightly outperforming the Eurozone.
Oh, yeah, and our exports, particularly services exports, are doing very, very well. I mean, this notion that's got around that Brexit has damaged our economy or damaged our trade, it seems to be completely evidence-free or against the evidence. But, we could have done much more, and we can still. I mean, the important thing is we can still do much more.
That's the point. The opportunity's there. They've just chosen not to use it. Actually, the truth is that our exports to the EU since 2019 are up some 12 or 13%. I think I'm right in saying goods and services around 340 billion quid. I mean, it's huge sums, but the point is it's up, not down. And even better, our exports to the rest of the world as a percentage of all exports and things, that again has gone up because the rest of the world is growing a lot faster than the EU.
And indeed, we've just joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, the first non-Pacific country to join it. And not only is that a big trade group with a lot of big economies, that they are very, very fast-growing economies around the Pacific Rim. So we can expect a lot of benefit. We could never have done that as an EU member, and we can expect a lot of benefit over the long term from that move.
Absolutely right. That, of course, is probably the fastest growing economic area. And I suspect we could never have done the huge AUKUS, both submarine and technology deal with the United States and with Australia, had we still been a member of the EU.
Yes, because we were getting sucked into European Union joint defence structures, very, very damaging for NATO and damaging, therefore, for the defence of this country and for Europe as a whole. But there's a sort of ideology, anti-American ideology, particularly on the part of the French, in trying to set up rival structures, which are both duplicative, costly, and ineffective.
Absolutely right. Trisha's just messaged in here saying that my feelings about Brexit are that the elite have delayed Brexit on purpose in order to rejoin, saying that it hasn't worked. And that sort of simply sums it up.
Well, I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of conspiracy theories, but I'm sure there's actually a significant element of truth in that. I mean, some things that, they seem, that the government seems either incapable or unwilling to take on vested interests who are keeping European Union laws in place, which we are no longer under any obligation to continue to follow. I mean, let me give you one particular very important example. We in this country, consumers in this country, pay more for significantly more for branded goods than consumers in the USA, and for the same brands of goods. Why is that so? Because the European Court told Tesco, when it imported genuine Levi jeans from North America to sell them here, that they were not allowed to do so without the consent of the brand owner, Levi Jeans. Now, they didn't want to consent because they didn't want their lower price jeans sold in the US market coming to this country and undercutting their own sales of the same goods that they sold for higher prices here. Now, that's madness that was imposed on us when we're a EU member. 7 years later, we've still got this rule in our law. There seems no sense of get up and go in the government. And the only reason I can think for a completely illogical rule that goods from the European Union come in, but not from outside, even though we're not a member. The only reason I can think of this is just they're keeping it in place somewhere in the bowels of Whitehall in order to make it easier to go back in the European Union.
That I think, Martin, is why the EU retained law bill that Jacob Rees-Mogg wants to bring in to scrap about 4,000 unnecessary laws has essentially been diluted and watered down. Martin, thank you so much indeed for joining me. Martin Howe, KC.